Hello, everyone. I'm Michelle.
And I'm Jackie.
And this is Targum Tea, a podcast which focuses on pop culture reviews and social media. In today's episode, we will be talking about the live-action remake of Mulan that was released on Disney Plus earlier this month. Beware, this review contains spoilers. Okay, so I guess we'll just start off with a general overview of how the film went. So I guess I'll do the very beginning, and then Jackie, you can just jump in and add. So we open in the film with this opening sequence of Mulan practicing in a field or whatever, and then there's a shot of her as a child jumping off of the roof and breaking something. Basically the plot of Mulan hasn't really changed that much. I know some people were alarmed that there were some changes, certain characters were in the movie and some songs were taken out, but the general plot was basically the same. Although in the beginning, you're introduced to Mulan's sister. Apparently she has a sister in this movie, but the sister gets 3 lines maximum, so she's basically not there. And so the opening of the film kind of sets it up to be oh, Mulan is very, I guess, she has too much chi, which is supposed to be a traditionally masculine thing in this movie, I guess. And it shows that her parents are not too pleased with her and kind of just trying to marry her off.
Yeah, that concept of chi is something that was newly introduced to this film. And I know traditionally, for people who meditate, chi refers to the energy of life that flows through everybody, but somehow in this movie they sort of used it as a superpower for Mulan. If you compared it to Star Wars, it would be the Force, but just manifested in Mulan. And like you said, they judged it as something masculine, and because she had too much chi, it was something that her parents would worried that wouldn't get her married off to a good husband.
That was really interesting to me because I feel chi is something, I am Chinese and I grew up in a very Chinese household. So chi is something that I hear all the time, and it's used in very casual ways, I guess. Sometimes it can refer to inflammation. Sometimes it can refer to, I don't know, just anything. It also just means air in Chinese. So it's not some weird, I don't know, magical power or whatever, but it was really interesting to see that in the film. It was something that basically only men were supposed to have. And so Mulan was weird for having it. And I think that was one aspect of the film that I really didn't vibe with, because I think in the original movie, what really appealed to me about Mulan was that she had to work her butt off to get to that position where, she is actually a strong and respected warrior that can hold her own in a fight, and, defend her country, save the day, all that. But in the movie, there was that one sequence, where it's where Make a Man Out of You should have been playing, that training montage where all of a sudden I guess time just stops and she's oh wait, I have chi, and then suddenly everything comes super easy to her. And it was what am I watching? I was so weird. I don't know.
So after we get introduced to her, we follow the traditional movie where she gets brought to the matchmaker and she sort of embarrasses herself in front of the matchmaker, and the matchmaker's you're never gonna get married, wah wah. And then the soldiers come, they're hey, you gotta come to war, every family needs to send a man. And then Mulan's father is injured and old and he falls, and then Mulan steals her father's armor and sword and she runs off to the training camp where she learns how to be a soldier. And at this training camp she meets the human versions of the friends that are in the animated movie, but they're a bit more lackluster in the in-person versions. And they've also changed Mulan's love interest, so it's no longer her general that is her love interest. It is just one of her fellow recruits, and his name is Honghui.
I just wanted to say there was that one scene that you didn't mention when she was running off to go join the other recruits or whatever. There's this weird scene where she's in the desert and I don't know, maybe she's having a tough time about to turn back, whatever. There seems to be some hesitation. And then there's this weird phoenix bird. I know it's supposed to be a phoenix, but oh my God, it looks like a really cheap paper kite of a parrot. I know what Chinese phoenixes are supposed to look like because you see them like in so many different aspects of like Chinese architecture or design or things like that. And usually it's paired with a dragon, which is like super cool. And I thought it was weird that they like left the dragon half out of this because there's supposed to be two halves of a whole. And like, I'm sorry, but that phoenix scene and this freaking phoenix just keeps showing up, and it really like it kept irritating me and pissing me off because it looks like a crappy paper kite.
And it contributed
but
nothing.
yeah, anyways. Yes, it really did. I don't know what it added to the film. I don't know why they put that thing in there. But yeah, so her love interest is no longer Li Shang. It's instead this other guy. I mean, he's cute or whatever. Every interaction, like you said, was very, very lackluster. And I think what really disappointed me was that training montage and all of that stuff. There's supposed to be like a lot of moments where you feel these characters bonding, and yeah, like you're supposed to see like the relationships build, and you're supposed to see Mulan overcome like some difficulties, and you know, it's just a fun like gender bend scene. But like the delivery of all of the lines in these parts were just so like bleh. Like there was no emotion behind them. I didn't feel anything from any of these characters. So then after that, Mulan and the rest of the soldiers are riding off into the battle. They realize that they ride off into battle, and they're fighting against the Rurons, which are, it's no longer the Huns. They tried to make it a little bit more historically accurate, I guess, by making them the Rurons. And this is when Mulan encounters the witch like in a proper fight. And so she runs off while everyone else is like struggling to take on the rest of the enemies, and she runs off with this like pack of smaller enemies, and she basically defeats them, of course, and then the witch comes out and they start fighting, and the witch very perceptively notices that Mulan has a lot of chi. She immediately notices that Mulan is a woman, and that she's not being honest with herself. And for me, like this moment was very compelling. The witch is a really compelling character for me because she's immediately introduced to the viewers as she kind of is like the underdog of the story. Like she is the woman who is just too powerful and too ambitious for her own good. And so she was shunned and outcast by like the rest of society. And she wants to be able to actually like see through her ambitions and everything. And that's why she was cast out. And so she kind of says the same thing to Mulan, and she's like, you need to be honest with yourself, and as soon as you are, they're going to cast you aside the same way that they cast me aside. So I definitely felt a lot of tension between her and Mulan. I feel like they were definitely very good foils to each other, I guess. And I wish we could have seen more of the witch, because also her character design, like she turns into a hawk and everything. It was so cool. Way better than a
She's
phoenix.
beautiful. She's so beautiful. Yeah, I agree. I think the witch was probably my favorite character because I thought she was so interesting, but at the same time, like they completely wasted her character. Like I think she was so powerful. Like I don't understand why she had to be like the assistant to the main villain, who is Bori Khan. When I feel like she was so much stronger than him and more powerful than him, and especially since she has this ability to shapeshift. Like, couldn't she have just pretended to be Bori Khan and taken over all the Rorans and just like led them to victory with whatever aim that it was that she wanted? But instead, she and Bori Khan both had similar goals in that they wanted like the destruction of the emperor, but hers was because like she felt like she wanted a society where she could be strong, she could be a woman with a lot of chi and just be herself without being like shunned, whereas like Bori Khan is like, oh, you killed my dad, I'm gonna kill you. And this whole time this whole time he treats her like really badly. Like he's like, you're just a slave to me. Like, and like for somebody, I thought it was just so like poorly written for her to be a strong female character who just like lets herself be used, you know?
Yeah, girl. The whole thing made no sense. Like, I think for the most part, like on the surface, like this remake didn't have any major plot changes from the original, because like the story about like Mulan like pretending to be a dude, running off, defending her family's honor, saving the country, da da da, all of that stuff is like basically the same. But the message is totally gone because they made like these weird like little changes, and they didn't really deliver on any of the characters that they should have. I would say that like that witch, honestly, like she really represented like the core of what, I mean, the original text, the Ballad of Mulan that these movies are based off of. That's what the original text was based off of. In the very like final lines of the Ballad of Mulan, it basically says like something about like the, you know, like that the female rabbit has like wider eyes and the male rabbit has longer legs, but when they're running side by side, who can tell the difference, right? So the whole idea is that like that there should be like gender equality, and that these women should be able to kind of live out, you know, their grandest ambitions. And that's what this witch really wanted. So if anything, she was the one who really could have delivered on that message. But she like dies in a really lackluster, really anticlimactic way. Like homegirl literally turns into a hawk, flies in front of an arrow, and then just like she like lets out this like hawk cry or whatever it's called. And I was like, are you kidding me? Because literally in the scene right before that, we get delivered this incredible just view of her like wearing like her version of like the emperor's robes, and she's like sitting in like the emperor's throne. It was beautiful. And then she just turns into a hawk. Yes. And then she just turns into a hawk and dies. So the whole movie was so like bizarre because like Mulan, I don't know about you, Jackie, but I didn't care about Mulan as a character. I mean, like, yes, like there was really no character development for her. The delivery of like, she doesn't have any like long like dialogues with people. Every single time she says something, it's like a very short and choppy phrase, and there's no moment that really allows you to develop any kind of intimacy with her. But with this witch, my God, like I've got the backstory, I've got the emotional trauma, I've got the future ambitions, all of this stuff. Yeah, and then she just dies. So
wait, so okay, side tangent. I think it's kind of funny that we haven't been able to finish the plot line without ranting at all. I don't know if it's a commentary on our attention spans or a commentary on how angry this movie has made us. But I think so when I originally heard that like Mushu was gonna be gone and like the singing was gonna be gone, I was okay with it because I was under the understanding that we would be getting a more realistic movie about like Chinese culture, about Mulan and what her story is about. But I think the problem with losing Mushu is that we lose so much of Mulan's humanity with him. Because throughout the animated movie, Mushu was basically who like Mulan would express her insecurities to. He would reassure her. And like in this movie, I don't know if Liu Yifei was the problem. I feel like I never got a lot of emotion from her when she was acting. And I also like the story itself, there was so much telling instead of showing. Like there had to be a narrator to tell us what was going on. And I feel like the point of having a movie be visual is so that we can understand the story by watching what's going on. And I felt like that was really missing.
Yeah, absolutely. I love what you said about Mushu because I mean, like we could have that discussion about like having, you know, this like little red dragon character like be kind of like a racist like thing or whatever and be like really inaccurate. But that's not a discussion that I want to have right now. What he did for the original film was he gave us insight into how Mulan was really feeling. But he also like challenged her, and he was really our window into seeing how she could grow. And so we didn't have any of that in this movie because what was the Phoenix doing? My God, the Phoenix didn't show up randomly. Float maybe. No, it didn't make any noises. It just floated, right? And it looked like a crappy paper kite that just wouldn't get out of the freaking scene. So there wasn't any of that. I mean, I think the most like interaction that Mulan had with another character was probably her father and the witch, those two characters. And so for me, like the father I felt was a very interesting character, and I got really excited by the opening because it starts with her father being the narrator and telling the story of his daughter, and I thought that was really powerful. But then it didn't really go anywhere, and then it just felt like kind of a cop out to kind of explain what was happening, to like have a narrator, like you said. So yeah, long story short, I mean, totally not worth $30 on top of $7 for like the existing subscription.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we didn't even touch on like the awful CGI.
Oh, yeah. And like the special effects when she's like fighting or as like a child and she's flying all over her village.
Oh God.
Um, let me think. Something that I thought was like also disappointing about her character is that she has no personality. Like her entire personality is based around loyal, brave, and true, which also, funnily enough, is very similar to the FBI's motto of fidelity, bravery, and integrity. I don't know
Oh my goodness.
where that connection comes from, but she, there's no personality, there's no humor. Like, I don't really, like you said, I don't really care about her as a character. And also, she's not relatable enough. I think the original Mulan was relatable because she was a klutz. She was somebody who, like,
Yes.
wasn't fitting in. She had no idea what she was confused, she was lost. Like, but this Mulan is just like, she's perfect. All she has to do is hide her perfection to fit like the standards expected of her, but overall she's perfect. Everybody else, like all the other girls are still normal, still want to like get married, but Mulan, she's perfect, she's special. And I was like, she's not a relatable character. Also, I think so many of the reasons why that this movie was perceived or received so badly was because there is that original Mulan to compare it to. To be fair,
Right.
I think if original Mulan didn't exist, I would be maybe a bit more happy with this movie, but it's just too easy to compare them.
Yeah, I think, I mean, well, what got me really excited about this movie is like, is that I'm able to have like a powerful female hero, someone who really pursues her ambitions, but she is imperfect and she does have things that she needs to overcome. And she looks like me, you know, and she comes from a similar background. And then this movie has so many, you know, it's a fully Asian cast. Some are Asian American, and then some are Asian nationals from East Asia, specifically China. But, you know, like you said before, maybe it would have been special if we hadn't had the original Mulan to compare it to. But also, like, this is not the first film of that kind either. Like, we had Crazy Rich Asians and we have The Farewell. And I don't think that's enough, like, at all. But those two films were incredible and they did incredibly well in theaters. And this movie just, I mean, like, I just felt like none of the cast really like vibed with each other. I didn't really feel chemistry between any of the actors. And so I felt like something must have happened on set, or rather didn't happen on set, where they weren't getting enough time to interact with each other. Maybe there wasn't like a trainer, like an accent trainer, for example, who was actually like teaching all of them in the same room on like how to convey like certain regional accents and things like that. That was something that really took me out of like, you know, the fictional reality of Mulan, was that you have people in this movie that sounded like they just learned English for the movie itself, which is fine because, you know, not everybody has to have like, you know, an undetectable English accent. But then you also had other people who sounded like they were New Yorkers or like they were from the Bay Area, right? So I'm sitting here like, wait a minute. Okay, so Mulan sounds like, you know, she's from mainland China, but her dad sounds like he's lived in Chinatown, Manhattan for a few decades. And then, you know, one of the generals sounds like he's from San Francisco. So like, what is going on here? So there was just so much like inconsistency. And I think part of my frustration with that is that I think it also kind of gives us a glimpse into the way that Disney was willing to give up a lot of things like standards wise with this film. And I don't know if that's because it's a fully Asian cast or something else, but like this whole streaming like release model that they have, they would not have tested it on like a Marvel movie. They just wouldn't have, you know? Like they decided to do this like test, this experiment with a movie that's granted it is a remake, but it's supposed to be a big deal, you know? And then I could tell like just throughout the movie, like there were so many areas where like there should have been some quality control with the CGI, with the accent training, with a lot of like the delivery. I was like, did they just, you know, shoot this once and then they were like, okay, we'll just edit it, you know, like because the delivery of a lot of the lines were awful. So I think that was really frustrating for me too.
Related to what you said about like having an all Asian cast, like I love seeing Asian representation on popular media. It's like it's something that I wanted as a child and I'm finally getting now. But so I looked into the behind the scenes for the cast and or like for the crew of the film, and it turns out there's not a lot of Asian people or Asian Americans in the crew supporting the film. The director was white and all four writers were white and I think the person in charge of costumes was also white. And I don't want to discredit their work. I just think there could have been more authenticity if the Disney producers had reached out to actual Asian people or actual Asian American people who have more like insight and connection with the material that they're trying to represent on the film. And another, it's not a major complaint. I think just being an Asian, like a Chinese American who can understand Chinese, it's so surreal watching a movie about ancient Chinese history set in ancient China with Chinese costumes and Chinese culture spoken entirely in English. I think it's okay because I understand that Disney's primary, I guess, target audience is American children. And so I guess I understand why that had to be in English. I think, though, that Disney has enough clout that they could, you know, take a little risk here or two. And Parasite had great reviews when that was entirely in Korean with subtitles. But like you said about consistency, so there's this one scene near the end where Mulan comes back into her village and my ears perked up because there was some Chinese spoken in the background. Like I heard a tiny smattering of Mandarin Chinese and I was like, wait a second, if they can speak Chinese in the background, why can't they speak Chinese in the big screen? But I understand this is a money-making corporation that seeks to profit, and English was probably the most logical decision to do that.
Well, you know, I'm glad that you did a little bit of research on the behind the scenes stuff. I did as well, because I think it just goes to show like how invested we were in this film. But I was taking a look. Yeah, and I was reading that, you know, Disney was really hoping to appeal to the mainland Chinese market with this film as well. So that's why it comes as such a disappointment to me, the way that it was handled, because, I mean, I also saw that, like, there were just so many white, I guess, creatives and cast members, like, behind the scenes, which is fine. But I think at the end of the day, if you're going to be telling, you know, a Chinese story and one of, you know, the biggest Chinese stories that you could possibly tell, you better be consulting Chinese people about it. And what you said before about the language, oh my God. So I would hear like, you know, bits of Mandarin in the background all the time. Like there were other scenes like in the training camps, I would just catch it. And I would be like, why would you have these two languages plus this diverse range of accents going on, like between background and foreground? I mean, it's just so much like inconsistent. Like who made that decision? I want to know. I just want to talk to them, you know? But then the other thing is, I think something that also really took me out of the film was when they would just say these like traditional Chinese, like parables or poems and lines. I'm sorry, but they sound so weird to me in English.
Yeah.
Like these are, because because even in like normal Chinese, like Mandarin Chinese, people don't talk that way. These are like ancient Chinese poems that have been carried down for centuries. And so people will quote them, but like they're so like famous in China that, you know, everybody knows when you say something like that, you're quoting a famous piece of poetry or history or something like that. And we don't really have that same culture in America, but it's not something that can just be translated to like, I guess, like modern English. It's as if you were like quoting like a Shakespearean quote, but it's so normal in your society that people won't think that you're weird, you know? So it just like the whole thing was just like bizarre to me. Like that's not something that can just be delivered in English.
Yeah. An example would be when she had like, oh, actually one good thing that I can say for the movie is I really enjoyed the setup for this scene where Mulan was getting her makeup on for the matchmaker. Like when they had like a cloth laid out and all her makeup started showing up, I was like, this is beautiful. I love this. But there's this one part where she's like walking with her sister and she's saying like, oh, this makeup won't come off. And she said, even a cold winter storm would not be able to blow this makeup off. And I was like, who talks like that?
Nobody says anything like that. Yes, that was so cringe. I mean, there were so many moments like that where I was just like, listen, like that's not how Chinese people talk. You know what I mean? Like that's why your Google Translate situation is not going to work for a Disney film that you spent millions of dollars on. But yeah, so definitely, like, I know there are so many reasons that people have been calling to boycott this movie, from Liu Yifei's comments on her explicit support of the Hong Kong police force, which had been criticized multiple times by different international human rights organizations for excessive, really gruesome police brutality and torture in detention. And then, like, you know, more recent news that came out about how this film was partially filmed in Xinjiang, with like right next to an area that has been criticized for massive detainment camps, arbitrary detainment camps of Uyghur Muslims there. So there's just so many reasons that people want to boycott this film. But I would say, in addition to that, don't pay for this film because it's just not worth it to watch. I'm serious. Like, it is not worth your money.
Yeah, agreed. I think it was just a money, like I think this trend of Disney turning classic animated movies into live action is just a money grab. And it loses the magic of what made Disney movies so attractive and magical as a kid. So yeah, agreed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm still hopeful for the future of film. I'm still hopeful for the future of increased representation of people of color, and not just like casting more people of color into films, but making those films actually about our narratives and our stories, whether they're modern or traditional. But I don't think this movie is really a good example of that.
Yeah, I think Disney tried to please both Chinese audiences and American audiences, and in the end, please nobody at all.
Yeah, not even themselves, because that measly $5 million they made off of this.
R.I.P. I would give the film maybe a 2.7 out of 5. I think I was, I guess, entertained enough that it was disappointing, I think, because I had expectations going in. I was mildly entertained. There were really pretty visuals when they were doing shots of the landscape or of her like makeup. But overall, the characters are really bland. The fake message of feminism was not really appreciated. And I was overall just not happy with the film.
Wow, I think you're being so generous. I would give it a 1 out of 5 because I really thought it was terrible. Gosh. I mean, it looked pretty, but there are so many other movies that look gorgeous and have such incredible, compelling storylines and won't make you feel like you wasted nearly 2 hours of your life. So I think if you want to watch a movie with a really compelling storyline about, like, you know, the Chinese American experience, watch The Farewell. If you want, you know, other movies about like traditional China with like a beautiful set and beautiful everything else, there's so many other Chinese produced Chinese starred dramas from like mainland China or Hong Kong or Taiwan that you could look at.
Yeah.
So don't be spending your money or your time on this movie.
I think the one good thing about this film is that it started to make me reflect on my own consumption of media and how it took Disney making a film about like Chinese characters for me to start watching it. I was like, why does Chinese like media have to be westernized for me to be able to enjoy it as a Chinese American? And I think now I'm gonna go seek out more Chinese films and Chinese TV shows because I want to learn more about accurate depictions of my culture.
I love that. I'll definitely hit you up with some recommendations.
Please do. And that's all for today. Join us next time on Targum Tea for more reviews, and make sure to follow the Daily Targum on our Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube for more content.